Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Adams Brothers Podcast. We are here this evening with Dale VC Holness. He is the former Lauderhill Commissioner from 2004 to 2010. He is also a former Broward County Commissioner, and he was also the Broward County Mayor during the height of the pandemic from 2019 to 2020, and he is now running for the U.S. Congress 20th Congressional District seat, formerly held by his late great friend, Mr. Alcee Hastings, who endorsed him before he passed away. Mr. Dale VC Holness, welcome back to the Adams Brothers Podcast.
Listen, brothers, thank you so much for having me on again. And thank you for the work that you do to help inform, educate, and uplift the people of our community. It is God's work.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we're happy to have you back on our show. And you are now running for the U.S. Congress, the 20th Congressional seat. Like I said, that was formerly held by your friend and your late friend, Alcee Hastings. So just go ahead and tell us why you want to run again.
So I think if those who are listening or watching, remember, there was only 5 votes that separated me from the person who won. And she put $3.7 million in the race, right? Against my $600,000 that I raised. And 5 votes separate us. And she promised everybody $1,000. People are asking for the $1,000. I haven't gotten mine yet. I don't know if you guys got yours yet.
We haven't gotten ours yet either.
Yeah, so
and we did have her on the podcast the last time she ran, and haven't heard from her if she wanted to come back on and talk to us again. But you're here, so we want to talk about who's here right now.
Yeah,
and
certainly.
You're running for the 20th congressional seat.
The reason I'm running, I believe that I can still contribute, as I have done over my 18 years in public office. Started in 2004 in the city of Lauderhill, where I started the Lauderhill Chamber of Commerce, put together a Lauderhill Education A+ plan, got the young men who were on the street corner across the street from City Hall and Police Station selling drugs off the street, helping them to get vocational training and really assist them in finding jobs, working with Career Source to do that. Because it's important that we find alternative means and helping some of them get in business by putting together a business incubator, Lauderhill Business Incubator, got to the county, and we continued working. We build a system in the county that help our small minority women-owned business get contracts, moving that procurement process to the point where when I got there in 2010, it was only 10.25% going to those groups. In 2020, whilst I was mayor, it went to 44%, $136 million going to those groups. That's how we empower our community. Entrepreneurship is a key component of America's great success. And too often, minorities, women, Blacks especially, are not at the table owning their own business, directing their own destiny, and creating wealth that is then able to be extended to future generations. So it's a critical time for us as a nation to ensure that many of the inequalities, inequities, lack of fair justice, lack of opportunities be fixed. We ought to fix it. In 2021, I passed an ordinance that created the Racial Equity Task Force to look at how we address the issue of race in our country. City Financial found that we lost $16 trillion over 20 years in gross domestic product. That means our economy wasn't growing at that rate. $16 trillion that we lost, that we didn't grow. But it says if we fix it, we could grow it by $5 trillion. There's such a thing as a glass ceiling in business and entrepreneurship that many women and minorities face, a lack of capital, lack of support to get them to move forward so that they can hire their families and the community that's close to them.
Okay, let's just jump right into this here because it's a hot topic right now. We all saw what happened out in Uvalde, Texas, the shooting at the elementary school out there. And the Democrats want to pass some sensible gun laws, and the Republicans, they do what they do best, and they just sit there and they just let it sit on the desk, the house, and they let these things sit on their desk, and they don't do anything to try and pass the laws because they think that their Second Amendment is being taken away from them and infringed upon. And most Americans are asking for sensible gun laws. I'm a gun owner. My brother is a gun owner. I'm all for guns. I'm for the Second Amendment. 120%. As far as a AR-15 or an assault rifle, I can do without that. And I own one. I own one too, and I don't consider that taking away my Second Amendment away from me. What are your thoughts on bringing forth sensible gun laws and putting it on the table and trying to get it passed in the House and get the Republicans to get on board? How would you attack that?
Let me tell you this. I read some statistics the other day that if most Americans pay attention to, it would be frightening to all of us. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for young people. 29% of those who die as young people die at the hands of guns. 29%. Now, yes, I'm for the Second Amendment, but here's this. Back in the day when we came up with this right to protect yourself and to defend the country, they use muskets. You load the bullet in, you put the gunpowder in, you fire, you pull. Yeah, exactly. How long does it take for you to do that? It takes some time, right?
Right.
Now we got these weapons of mass destruction that folks are going to equate with that. No, it's not. Okay. We have to be sensible about this. We have to evolve and adapt as the founding fathers did when they created this great nation. And we're still evolving. Listen, under the Constitution, slavery was okay. Blacks were treated as 3/5 of a person, okay? So were Indians. Now, we're in a different time, so we must adjust for the time. There's no need for us to have an 18-year-old with an assault rifle and AR-15 to go out and kill people and kill young people. Listen, science shows that your brain is not fully developed until you're at least 25 years old. We don't allow kids to buy alcohol until they're 21 years old.
That's true.
You can't buy a beer.
You can't rent a car either.
Yeah, but you can go out and get an AR-15. What sense is that? We have people who are not mentally capable of conducting their lives that are now able to go out and buy a gun. There should be background check at minimum, right off. It makes sense, right? We should ban these assault rifles. When we did have that ban in place, and we did at one point in time in our country,
right,
we weren't having as many people die. Now, do we prefer to save people's lives or to have a gun? For some people, and most gun owners like yourself, respectable, sensible gun owners know that that's not a good thing. You just said that, and the vast majority of Americans, more than 80%, want to see the Congress do something about this. So I am for an assault ban, a rifle ban. I am for background checks. That's sensible. I am for warnings if someone has mental illness or other issues or threaten people with violence, that they ought not get a gun. And if they have one, we ought to make sure they don't have one to utilize against people. Increasing the age to buy these weaponry has to be sensible. We must do these things and we'll save lives. And there's cost to this. When you think about these shootings and how many people get hospitalized, taxpayers are paying for that, okay? Because we must supplement the healthcare system. So many may have insurance, but those who don't have, what happens? We're really robbing ourselves of this. We can do this as a nation, and the legislation that's coming forward is just a start. Putting more money into mental health treatment is critical for us, not only as it pertains to the gun issue, but as it pertains to the number of people we put in prison and in our jails. I got to tell you this, sad news, that the majority of people in Broward County jails today have mental issues. 80% are on psychotropic drugs. They're taking medicine to stay sane. Think of that. So we need to put more money there. In fact, one of the last things I did in 2021, while I was on the commission, was to put in our budget $1.5 million to increase the number of supportive housing for those who are mentally ill. Because what we find is this: if someone has mental illness and you give them the treatment, you give them the support system they need, they can function. Unfortunately, when they don't have that, they end up on the streets. And from the streets, they go to our jail. And it's costing $160 per night for us to keep them there. Doesn't make any sense for us to do that. So part of what we must do also is look at our criminal justice system and reform it. We have people in jail that can't pay $200 to be bonded out for minor offenses. And yet we have people who have committed more grave crimes that can bond out for $100,000. Is that system fair? Doesn't seem fair to me at all. So we need to change that. And in so doing, we'll create a more productive, prosperous country for everyone.
Yes. Yes. Right. And Mr. Holness, what do you think went wrong in the last election against your opponent? What do you think happened? Because the momentum was swinging your way. And just tell us, what do you think went wrong, and what are you doing pretty much to correct that in this new election?
Well, for starters, $3.7 million in advertising can certainly buy a lot of advertising, and then you make a promise that is not realistic. But for people who are low income, who really need to get some assistance, they saw this as an opportunity for them to really improve their lives. They thought that once they voted, they could actually go to the clerk and get the money. And people actually voted at the voting sites and then go over to the clerks at the voting sites and says, I voted for Sheila, how do I get the $1,000? It's really sad that we're in that state, okay? That would have cost $1 trillion per year out of a $7 trillion budget. How could we do that? There are other sensible things that we must do to deal with that. But let me tell you one of the things that you asked me about. I'll go back to some of the things we must do to improve the lives of our people. But in terms of what I'm doing different, I'm in Palm Beach a lot more now than I was last time, right? Because when you look at the votes, people are calling me and congratulating me looking at the votes coming in Broward County. I got 3,000 votes more than anyone else, even though there are 4 strong candidates from here: Perry, Thurston, Bobby DeBose, Barbara Sharif, and myself. We split the vote up. That's not happening this time. So there's the whole change in dynamics that will change that, because we all represented the same people. We've been out there for many years in service to the community. That's not there this time. They're not running. They're running for other seats, or they're not running at all. Palm Beach, I lost the votes up there. They are more. I'm building a stronger team in Palm Beach than I did before. I'm staying engaged and out front as I've always done over many, many years. But in Palm Beach, that was my Achilles heel. That's where I really fell down. We didn't have a strong enough team up there. They don't know me as well as they knew me in Broward County for the work that I've done. So that's something that changes, and we'll be doing that again. And certainly what I'd love to do is get some folks to give me some more money to help me along the way. You can go to wholenessforcongress.com. wholenessforcongress.com. Just add that .com on what you see on the screen. wholenessforcongress.com. Volunteer, make a donation. So let's go to the issue of what do we really need to do to improve the lives of our people? Something that I've dedicated my life to. We must work to ensure that our children, starting at the daycare level, have adequate facilities and they start learning that. The federal government can put funding in place that helps that, and tie that to support from the local communities. Oftentimes when the federal government sends funds down, it comes in the forms of grants. And attached to those are requirements of certain performances that the local community must do. We can do that with our daycare centers. Most of the lower income communities don't have good facilities because people can't pay as much in those communities to afford the kind of quality service that they need. We must subsidize those where we need to. and build more of those. We must put more money in K through 12, especially targeting lower income communities that have been left behind and left out. We must also provide more funding and support for those moderate low-income students who need to go to college. And those who are not on that pathway, afford more vocational and technical training for them. Not everyone is going to go to college. And those who are not doing so can still be very productive and prosperous. You talk about a plumber, you talk about an electrician, you talk about those who are in those skill sets that provide construction services. They can own their own business and make more than many people who've gotten to college. Because I know some folks who own their own AC business and plumbing business that they're making $1 million a year. Okay, that others might not be because they own their own business. We must provide for entrepreneurship opportunities, technical support, funding support for those communities that need the help in order to grow the economy there so that we don't leave communities out. The Opportunity Zone Act gives us a platform for us to be able to target dollars into these lower income, high unemployment communities without going for the issue of, well, we're giving it to Black folks or we're giving it to brown folks. We know that in many of these communities, a large percentage of people there are Black and brown, but also in rural communities, you have a similar problem where you have high poverty, high unemployment that needs to be addressed. This is a platform that we can target dollars towards these communities and help lift up the communities that have been left behind. And make sure that every American is living to their fullest potential. Our greatest assets are our people. And we must invest more in ensuring that they're living to their fullest potential. We cannot be the nation that is known for having the most people in our prison, more than any other country. That's making people unproductive. And often, too often, for small, minor offenses, minor misdemeanor offenses, and for mental illness, for addiction. That doesn't make sense. We need to find a way to make our people more productive across the spectrum.
Okay, and also, Mr. Holness, what are your plans or what thoughts do you have on the tackle rising gas prices and inflation? Because I think what you're saying is good, but I think right now, I think that is one of the that people would like to know. Your constituents want to hear about how you're going to tackle the gas prices and the inflation, and I think that is very important to tackle that, and I think you would gain a lot of votes through that.
It's a real serious issue for us. I commend the president for increasing the supply of gasoline by tapping into the reserve. I think we need to go deeper into it to get more gasoline out on the market so that prices can be driven down. The fact that he's going to Saudi Arabia, even though I'm not fond of that government today, it signals that we're working with our partners around the world to produce more. I certainly think that we can look at countries that are not producing as much as they could and figure out how we find a way to get them to produce. We need to produce more here also. There are wells in this country that are not fulfilling the maximum production. We ought to look to see how we do that. There are leases that are not being utilized for oil and gas that we ought to make sure that these companies are not gouging us as they are, because there's some of that going on. The profitability of these oil companies have grown exponentially. In a crisis like this, we ought to be able to put some controls in place on how much they can charge above what their normal cost is. That's something that we must be able to do. And Congress ought to support the president on this issue to ensure that we're reducing the cost there. Because you know what? Almost everything that you touch has something to do with the price of fuel. Because if you're buying some vegetables, it has to be transported there. There's a cost for fuel to transport it there. If you're buying a book, you're buying all of it has to move. And right now we depend very heavily on fossil fuels. We need to also, at this point in time, look to see how we can increase the use of non-fossil fuel. We ought to expand solar energy. It's the sun. It's not going away, right? So right now we ought to be looking to do that, creating more energy efficient buildings. That's something we did at the county. We put in place electric vehicles to reduce that. today we have to make sure that we increase production across all systems, both domestically and in other countries, to increase the supply so that the price can go down.
Okay, let's briefly talk about another hot topic, and that is the insurrection, January 6th, what happened last year in 2021. And we all saw what happened. Some crazy people went and stormed the Capitol, and they tried to
overthrow the government
and basically, overturn the election.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that Donald Trump should be held accountable for his inactions?
For his actions and inactions.
Actions and inactions.
Yes. Yes, he ought to be held accountable for it. He's the one who caused it.
Yeah.
He went out and told all these lies and encouraged people to come to Washington. He told them he was going on there with them, but a coward didn't do it.
Yeah.
He sent them.
He incited a riot.
He absolutely incited a riot and ought to be tried for it. Okay, I think it was treasonous what occurred there in our capital. And I got to tell you, here's the saddest part of this. That had a bunch of brothers like you and I gone up there, we wouldn't get to the steps.
Yeah,
that's true.
The guns would be ablaze. And I'm still shocked that the Capitol Police didn't use more deadly force than they did.
Right.
They had weapons. A good percentage of them did. I mean, the one person, when they breached the inner circle where they were going into the chamber, the brother inside had to shoot somebody. Okay. Yes. And that kind of drove them back. Had a few shots been fired before, what would have happened?
And they were upset at him for shooting them when they tell us to comply.
Right? But it is, and many people are suspicious. Were these folks involved with them? We know the Republicans were. We know the House of Representatives. Many of the Republicans in the House of Representatives were supportive of these folks. And what's really crazy is that they were on the fire and they still want to support this man and what he did. Still won't call these people out for what they did. Liz Cheney, God bless her soul. She ought to be commended for what she's done. To be on the forefront and not look at saving her seat to stay in politics, but to do what's right for the people. Those are the kind of leaders what we must have. Not someone who's there for their own aggrandizement and to stay there for a long period of time, but someone who's willing to put it all on the line for justice, for fairness, and for what's right for the American people.
Yeah, she's now the outcast in the Republican Party. You know, they want her out for, taking the lead on this as a Republican. So that's not sitting too well with the Republican Party right now.
It isn't, but she's being honest. She's utilizing every bit of integrity. She's forthright, and she's putting it all on the line. And that's what ought to be done.
Right.
And history will remember her and be on her side in the future, because one day, like she said, Trump will not be there for them, but they will have to look at, their conduct and what they did or did not do.
That's absolutely true. Right. True of it. I tell you, I'm so disappointed in the Republican Party. There was a point in time when I thought that there's some issues and some values that they had that could be appealing to everyone, such as not over-regulating businesses, because entrepreneurship, again, is what drives our economy, such as being fiscally conservative to make sure we're not spending what we don't have and saddle future generation with that. Right. To be a country that was open to looking forward to how we can influence the world. That's not the party that's in power anymore. It's now the Trump party of lies and really bad rapport. Yeah. These folks there's no sense of how we work together to build a better future. They're about tearing things down so that Democrats look bad and saying crazy nonsense that separates and divide the country so that they can stay in power. Using immigrants, using blacks, and using people who are LGBTQ as tools to stay in power, not because they want to do good, but because they want to stay in power to ensure that the few folks around them are rewarded. That's not what we ought to be doing for our country, this great country. And we're going to get beyond this, I can tell you that, because that's one of the things about this great nation, is that we might go the wrong way for a period of time, but over time, the long arc of truth and justice often prevails. We look back at the days of Martin Luther King. Look how far we've come. We still have a long way to go. But because we have such an open society, because we have a democratic form of government, where I can be on your show saying the things that I need to say to tell people what I'm about, okay? And bringing ideas to the fore that can benefit us all. We grow from it. And I believe that in another few years, we'll look back and say, wow, look how far we've come.
Right. And that party is really full of white nationalists right now. That's part of the problem there, that even when former President Trump was in office, he didn't want to address the white nationalists that were within his party now. And that part, it's all about power now with the Republicans. I just saw today on the news where they're looking at ways right now to try to sabotage President Biden's plan to tackle inflation. What happened to that patriotism that they once talked about and told Black people to be patriotic and saying we were unpatriotic? But they're coming up right now with a strategy to try to undermine the president's plan to tackle inflation. I fear for our nation sometimes. I really do. Moving forward.
I got to tell you this: when you look at the strategy that they have utilized, we've heard of the Southern strategy in the past, where they would basically pit blacks against white in the South in order to win election. They're doing this on a grand scale nationally. Here's what they've looked at. They've looked at the fact that many white Americans are insecure that their prosperity and the level of where they are might erode. And that's such a false narrative. That's not going to happen, because if you lift everybody up, everybody benefits. As I talked about, growing our economy and creating the $5 trillion, if we have racial equity, every person in this country would benefit from it. But what they're using is fear. They're making people afraid of others, and they're using that as a wedge issue to keep in power. And it seems to be, it's all about the power. It's nothing more than the power has gotten to their heads.
Yes.
There was a point in time when they would come together and find some compromise, because the art of basically moving forward politically is finding ways you can bring something forward that you may not get all of it. I've done that at the county, where I didn't get everything I want on an ordinance or a piece of legislation that I brought, but I basically got the input of the others, and we move an agenda forward to benefit the people. That's not what's being done by this Republican Party. You find that the governor is now taking on Disney. It doesn't make sense at all, what they're doing. Not from you and I perspective, but for them staying in power, because they know that at this point in time, white votes are still a majority. And because the fear and unease many whites have, they can tap into that fear, which is what Donald Trump did, to stay in power.
Yeah. Fox News helped, OANN, a lot of the media helped, tap into that white fear. And Tucker Carlson, Sean Hannity, they're on every night scaring white folks to death about Black people and the direction of this country, and it's all false.
It is, absolutely.
Okay, Dale VC Holness. Oh, well, you have another question?
Yes, Mr. Holness, I got one question about what would you do before we end it, what would you do to lower the cost of prescription drugs and the Medicare and keeping Social Security, alive, solvent?
So let me tell you this. There's some measures that we can go with Social Security. One, we can raise the income level as to which people are paying into Social Security. As it is now, we stop at, I think, about 140,000, somewhere about that. But if you go a little bit higher, you could extend the life of Social Security. The people who have worked to build this great nation deserve to live with dignity for the rest of their lives. The amount of money that someone, a Social Security recipient, gets is about $19,000 per year, an average. You can't live on that unless you have some other supplement to supplement you. So I think that we need to increase that amount. We must ensure that Medicare stays solvent, Social Security stays solvent. If we're able to find a way to create more competition in the drug pricing area, or we can do that also. I'm not opposed to having drugs be imported into our country. We import other stuff also. We can't just protect the pharmaceutical companies who are overcharging people for these drugs that you can get outside the country. Same drug.
Pay more, cover less.
For a fraction of the price. We need to make sure that we're doing that. The expansion of Medicaid for low-income people is critical also, because here's what's going on. If someone doesn't have insurance coverage, they end up in an emergency room. It costs you and I more because you have to pay for those emergency room treatment that no one else is paying for. If you have an insurance policy in place, you should do that. I believe that we ought to have Medicare for all, where everybody gets to be a part of that system, where we have full insurance for everyone. Health is wealth. If you don't have wealth, you can't be as productive as you need to be to produce for yourself and your family and the country. Right. So it is essential that we find a way to lower these costs of prescription, work to expand access to healthcare for everyone in this great country.
Right. Yes, because I mean, looking at it, I mean, we're all going to near that age one day, and definitely expanding to include dental and vision. I think it's very important in moving fast. And I think if the Democrats can jump on that, because Trump was running his mouth one time about, and I was like, he's going to probably pull it off. He's, at the time he had the people in there to pull it off, and it would have looked very bad for even under him to do it, and the Democrats then join suit. But I just hope, when you get to Congress, because I'm saying when you're going to be there this time. Yes, I'm speaking it into existence. You're going to get there. But when you get there, I would hope at some point you can definitely take the lead on that and run with that.
Especially that healthcare, man. That healthcare is
absolutely. Both my mother and my father worked in the healthcare field. My mother, a nurse's assistant, my father, a RN, a registered nurse, working in actually psych is where he specialized in. So I understand the need for ensuring that we pay our healthcare workers a good, decent wage also. It's critical that we have facilities that provide the best care for our people. But, the Republicans, Rick Scott now wants to tax low-income people.
Yes,
everybody should pay tax.
Rick Scott.
Yes, Rick Scott.
Yeah.
Multi-millionaire Rick Scott. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for why? Because he wants to appease some other folks who will give him more money in his coffers so that he can win the next election. And he has enough already. It is shameful that they want to use that kind of strategy to stay in power.
He came under a lot of pressure for that. So he had to back off of that because he would have done tremendous damage to people here, especially here in Florida. We're suffering now, high insurance rates. That's another thing I hope at some point. I mean, I know the Florida legislators have to work on that, but I would hope at some point that, we can get this insurance, the rates of the insurance
all the way across the board.
Exactly, especially for the
health insurance, homeowners insurance, auto insurance. This is the insurance industry, as a whole, that needs to be overhauled, man. They just let these insurance companies basically do what they want.
And that's what people are worrying about right now, Mr. Holness. They're worrying about gas. They're worrying about inflation. They're worrying about rising healthcare costs. They're rising about the insurance.
And cost of housing also.
Yes.
Cost of housing has gone through the roof.
Yes, the cost of housing, that's definitely.
So part of what I tell you that, because I have a real estate background, how we can deal with that, okay? One, we need to build more units and ensure that we have what's called inclusionary zoning in our cities and in our counties. What does that mean? It means that when you build a large number of new units, you have affordable units in those places, okay? 15% at least, so that those who are on the lowest end of the spectrum are able to afford it. If we don't have places for those who are in our workforce to live, they're going to go somewhere else. They can't afford to live here. And if they can't afford to live here, then our economy will go down. It is critical that we have good quality housing for every person in America. The other thing that we can do is also the voucher system that we have, the Section 8 voucher system. We ought to use more of that to help finance new development by pledging more of these for new development that's being built. And also within that same system, use those vouchers to create home ownership opportunities. Now, there's some Section 8 housing authorities that have used this to put people in the housing. Rather than just have it that it just goes to the landlords or the developers, it can go to you to pay your mortgage, a percentage of your mortgage. And then you can pass that on to your children. So we end the generational poverty that exists within many of our communities. That's something that I believe that I'll be able to push forward and bring to the table should the great people of South Florida send me to Washington. And I hope they will, and I believe they will. This time I believe it's different. Okay, you need a strong Democrat in this seat also. Why do you need a strong Democrat in this seat? Because this is the most Democratic seat in the state of Florida. And if you can turn out the votes, which I've worked on doing for many years, helping Gillum, helping, I go back all the way to Jesse Jackson's 84-88 campaign, Bill Clinton's campaign. Center for Phone Calls was my real estate office. Barack Obama's first place to operate from 24/7 was my real estate office. And that got me an invitation to the White House for the first Christmas party that he hosted. So you need a strong Democrat in this that will move the community forward to turn out to vote. I lost by 5 votes. Every vote counts. If we can turn that out, here's what it will do. It will ensure that we get a senator who understands the needs of people within this district. And I'll be pushing for that. I'm supporting Val Demings in a huge way. Okay, made financial contribution out on the front line with her also, pushing this. If we can get her in, that'll give us 1 more votes towards where we can get away from having this filibuster, stopping legislation that are important. When it comes to the presidency, we know how important that is for us to have someone in place like a Biden, like a Barack Obama, who understand the needs of the broader community, that will not use tactics like the previous president used to divide us, but to bring us together to build a better future for all of us. This is a very, very important election. Holnessforcongress.com. You can learn a lot more about the 18 years that I've served you here in South Florida to build a better place for all of us to live. Holnessforcongress.com. You can donate there. You can volunteer there. Spread the news. You can share information from there with others who you can get to help us win this next election.
Before we let you go, tell everyone, tell the voters out there, when is early voting? When is the Democratic primary, and when is midterms?
Beautiful. So early voting comes after vote by mail goes out. So let me start with vote by mail. The vote by mail goes out for military personnel and overseas residents, our citizens, on July 9th. July 14th, vote by mail goes out to the local community. On August 13th, local vote, early voting starts, and that goes until the 21st, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So on August 13th, you can vote at the early voting sites. There'll be many scattered across South Florida. And then the last day to vote is August 23rd. So there's not an election day anymore. There's a period for election, right, which starts with the vote by mail ballot going out on July 14th, the best locally, and overseas July 9th. And again, on August 13th through the 21st, you can vote early at the early voting sites. Now, on the 22nd, the Sunday, the Monday, there's no voting at the early voting sites. There's no voting at the early voting sites. You have to look at your voting card and go to the precinct where you're designated to vote. There are many people who argue with me at these early voting sites because they go there thinking they can vote there. So well, I always voted here. But yeah, you always voted there early. But on election day, you must go to your designated voting site to vote.
Right. And the midterms is in November.
November 2nd is the day for the election for the.
I don't know why I have the 8th here on my phone.
I was kind of thinking it was
November 8th on my phone.
You know what? I think I misspoke. Usually it's actually the first Tuesday in the month, and that's you're right. It's not the 2nd.
Yeah, I got November 8th on my phone.
It is. It's November 8th. I misspoke there.
November the 8th.
November 8th. But you know, one of the reasons is I'm so focused on the primary election because after the primary election, whoever wins the Democratic primary will win the general election.
Yes,
right.
Historically,
it's on November 8th, and you'll have a similar situation where you'll be able to get vote by mail, vote early, or vote on election day. There's something else I want folks to understand. If you're not a registered voter, there's a deadline by when you need to register to vote in this election, and that's July 25th. To change your party affiliation or to vote in this election, you need to do it on July 25th. If you're not a Democrat, you won't be able to vote for me in the Democratic primary. You will only be able to vote for judges and school board members for the most part. Very few other offices you'll be able to vote for. So in August, you'll have the Democratic and Republican primary elections. Whoever is selected from those two groups will face each other in the November election. So it is important that you vote during the primary election. In the special election, only 11% of the registered voters in the district voted. 15% of the Democrats voted. So that's when the decision is made as to who gets elected more often than not. Because especially in Broward County and many parts of South Florida, where you have strong Democratic counties, you won't be able to vote if you're not a Democrat in most elections. Republicans can vote in some, a lesser amount, but they can vote in some. So party affiliation matters. And people say, well, I'm independent. Well, really, you may be no party affiliated, but you're really not independent. You're dependent on those who votes in the primary to send you someone to vote for in the general election, the midterm in this instance. So consider that as you go forward. If you want to be able to have a greater voice and vote in more election or vote in less election and be a no party affiliate person.
All right. Well said. Well said. Dale VC Holness, he's running for U.S. Congress, the 20th congressional seat, formerly held by his good friend and the late Alcee Hastings. Dale, good luck to you. We know you're going to do it this time. You're going to win. And we look forward to seeing you back on the Adams Brothers podcast here in the near future. And we want to thank you for coming by.
I thank you so much for what you do. This office, as I've used my other office, will be one that will bring the entire community together and look at what the most critical issues are for our people, all our people, and find a way to help those who are in need, especially those who have been left out of our system, to ensure that we're building a prosperous community that benefits everyone, not just some. And that means that those who are very wealthy pay their fair share, and those who are in need of some assistance gets the assistance they need so that they can be as productive as they can be to create prosperity for themselves, their family, our community, and our nation. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, yeah. Give it up for Dale VC Holness. Thank you so much for stopping by the Adams Brothers podcast. We appreciate you. Good luck to you in the election coming up in August, and we look forward to seeing you back on the Adams Brothers podcast here in the near future.
It certainly will be. Thank you.
Good luck to you, sir, and thank you for stopping by.
Grateful.